We're less than a month away from CitizenCon, Star Citizen's biggest event of the year. Now, normally, this is when CIG drop the most exciting info and get us hyped up for the year ahead. But this year, it's a CitizenCon Direct, a 2-hour video. What should we expect? I've got my predictions ready. I would love to hear yours in the comments. But first, last week, we had a pretty big dose of expectation management from Jared.
Just want to be real clear with the expectations management. No Squadron 42 presence at all. That's not a release date. That's not any of that stuff. We're letting those people stay focused.
I was pretty surprised by this. I was expecting them to build hype this year for Squadron at this event, but that's just not what they're doing. So what will they actually show us? If it's nothing to do with Squadron, well, Jared did also outline that.
It's a much smaller, more focused thing, specifically on the work of the Star Citizen team and what they plan for the next year of development. We're not going to look at 1.0 stuff and so like this. It's just we're going to take a look at what the next year of our intention is for that. So it's a much smaller, more dedicated thing.
So no 1.0 stuff. So I think we can forget about anything like space stations or the 1.0 story or the shield token stuff. They're not talking about that. CitizenCon Direct will be looking at what the Star Citizen team is planning for the next year of development. Now, that could mean things that will come out in the next year, or it could just mean things that they're working on in the next year. My guess will be that it's the second. I think we're effectively going to see a load of updates on what they showed us last year. So much of what they showed at CitizenCon in 2024 was concept art or early development, and my prediction is that we're going to get a look at how those things are progressing. Things like planet tech. Last year, we saw the early stages of the Genesis tech, which is effectively a bunch of different things bulked together as Planet Tech V5. And we saw new biomes, we saw Starkitect, their ability to put different locations around in clusters together. They have talked at various points this year about Genesis and how they're going to maybe put a first planet in Stanton, and I guess that this is what we're going to see. We're going to see a big update. We might see our first example of a planet using the whole Genesis suite of things. So Microtech is kind of the obvious one. If you look at the biomes that they showed last year, maybe some of the foresty type things suit Microtech, but maybe Hurston, the swamp stuff, maybe they'll change the colors and make it all Hurstony and garbagey, I don't know. But it'll be really interesting to see what they show us here because, yeah, last year it was kind of slides. It wasn't mainly in-game stuff. Some of it was, but a lot of it wasn't. And it will be interesting to see how far it's all come along. The other big part of that panel was the global illumination stuff. So ray trace global illumination, even if you hate ray tracing in every game, CIG basically are using ray trace global illumination and a software version of it to light the whole game. Their argument is that there's no realistic way for artists to go around a whole planet and light locations manually. There's just no way for that to work. And so they have to use a kind of global system that will just kind of turn on and work. And global illumination is their system for that. We've seen various updates for the last couple of years at CitizenCon. There are hints that it's actually kind of coming. The latest tech preview had some of the settings you could see, but you couldn't turn it on. I am predicting we see a global illumination demo for a location or for a planet maybe. I really hope we do see that. That would be one thing I'm looking forward to. And again, even if you don't like ray tracing, this will help them speed up in terms of developing locations and things like that because they don't have to light everything individually. Last year, we also saw social tools, the org stuff. Everybody was very excited about this, but if you remember, it was a lot of slides again and mock-ups and concept art potentially, nothing in game whatsoever. Have they been working on this? I'm not sure they have. There's not really been any big mentions of any of this stuff. And my fear with this would be that it's just not a massive priority at this point, and all the things they are trying to get in the game. Have they created a team that's really focused on this? I fear, and I don't want to say this, but my fear is that we won't see anything on this. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope we do see some progress of it working in game, but I don't know how much of this stuff until they've kind of finalized all their server meshing stuff and the dynamic server meshing stuff. Can they push some of this stuff right now, apart from the artwork of it, which they kind of already did the concepts for? I don't know. My fear is we won't hear anything on this one. Creatures obviously have been a feature of the game over the last few years. Last year, We had the worm coming in a big way. We saw a big demo at CitizenCon and a big battle, spaceship flying around. What we actually got in game this year wasn't that. It wasn't a big battle with ships. They kind of hid the worm under a storm so that you couldn't take ships in. So will we see something closer to the original vision? I don't know about that, but maybe we'll see a new creature. There's been talk of a new creature, and maybe we'll get a new Apex version of that to fight in a big battle somewhere. I don't know. They did talk a bit about monster hunting being a thing. It's not really moved that far in 2025, so maybe there'll be some updates on creatures. In that panel from last year, there was also a load of stuff on the armor, starware, and it almost seems like they've forgotten all of this stuff. A lot of the armor that they showed has actually arrived in the game this year, but there's not been any stats with any of it really. And so my assumption again on this is that there's just bigger fish to fry, bigger priorities, and this has all been moved to the back burner. Moving on to the fun stuff though. So Nyx, a lot of people I've seen commenting are hoping for Nyx, some sort of Nyx release maybe, or maybe some sort of preview at the end of 2025. I don't think that's going to happen. My feeling with this is that they took so long to hype up Pyro. They showed us bits for years and years. They teased stuff and they built up the hype for it, and they've done almost nothing on Nyx. Apart from last year's panel on this, there's not been anything. And so I don't think they're going to just chuck Nyx into the game in any way. I don't think they can, for a start. I think one of the things that Benoit talked about on the SCL was that they're not planning to push the server numbers anytime soon, so they're not going to increase the shard sizes. So we're at 800 now. Sometimes he said there's occasional tests at 800, but normally 600. And I don't know how they would put in Nyx without increasing the player count. I don't know. Maybe they would. Maybe they would have it off as another SaaS system and just have 600 players. But my suspicion is that Nyx itself isn't that close, but I do think we'll be showing some stuff. So Nyx is the system. Last year we saw Delamar, the asteroid with the base and everything. I think potentially we'll get a run around the interior of this. It looked pretty good last year. It looked pretty finished. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had a full-on demo back to the days of Levski and Lagski, if you remember. But we also might see maybe early looks at the planets and the moons of Nyx. One of the features of Nyx is supposed to be that it is plagued by Vandal raids. Will they start to show us any Vandal stuff? Again, I don't think so. I think I've said for a while now, I think the Vandal are kind of off the cards in game until Squadron 42 is done. But in the latest 4.3.1 PTU, I'm not going to say exactly what happens, but there's been lots of stuff floating around leaks wise about something to do with Vandal at least. So maybe I was wrong. So maybe we'll see some Vandal attacks. I mean, this is real. I'm really pushing the boat out here, but yeah, I think we'll see some stuff of Nyx as a system, but I don't think we're going to have it released any time soon. And then moving on to the other system that they showed us something of last year, Castra. Have they been working on this? Will we see some progress on Sherman? What we saw last year was a pretty impressive looking demo, but as you look closer at it, it mentions it's pre-production and there's a lot of kind of repetition of assets. It wasn't anywhere near being ready for game. There's whole processes they need to go through. White box, grey box, final art. It's a huge location. And again, I imagine last year what we saw might have actually just been created for this demo to show it off. And I just don't think it's that realistic to think that they've made massive progress on this. The environment teams for Star Citizen and the location teams have been massively busy this year working on things like the Hathor locations, obviously all the worm stuff, and the ASD facilities. Have they had any time to make progress on Sherman? I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't think I predict we actually won't see anything from Castra this year. There's always a ships section at CitizenCon, and that will definitely not be changing. They've now changed things, obviously, this year to remove concept ships, really, from what they do. So we're going to probably see some straight-to-flyable stuff. We talked about this a little bit on my stream. We're starting to stream Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 9 a.m. UK. So feel free to come and join us over there. It's been a lot of fun on YouTube and Twitch. But we talked about this. We thought the Paladin might be an option. The Perseus potentially is more like an IAE ship. But There's also things like the Drake silhouette thing. There's going to be something that comes out of nowhere, and maybe it'll be that one. People are excited about that one. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the ship that they suddenly went, bang, here it is. You don't know anything about it, but here it is, and give us your money. There'll be some ship stuff, that's for sure. Next, we can talk about crafting. So last year, we obviously saw, again, lots of slides and some mock-ups of what they might want to do. It was mentioned in the August monthly report that there is now a multiplayer playable crafting prototype, and I hope and I think this is what we'll see from crafting this year. Some sort of in-game, probably still program art stuff, but a glimpse into how crafting will eventually play out. I think it's probably still a long way off in terms of a live release, but CIG are actively working on crafting, and I think they'll want to show us something. But I'm not really sure they are really actively working on base building. I had a quick look back through the monthly reports from this year, and I can't see any mentions of progress on base building. Maybe I'm missing something, let me know, but it just doesn't seem to be a priority right now. It's possible that they've been keeping everything quiet and they're going to try and blow us away with some big reveal and update. And this is one of the things that people are most excited about. So it would be surprising if there was no update, but I think this is really 50-50. I think we'll have to wait and see. Engineering, we know, is coming to the tech preview. Benoit and Jared talked about this. We obviously had an update a while back from Torsten at a German Bar Citizen event. Will we see some sort of update on this? I suspect we will. It's obviously, they've been working on it and it's quite close to coming to tech preview, and so it just makes sense to do another reveal. They've obviously talked about this at CitizenCon for multiple years, and I think we'll probably see what they've been working on and what it looks like now. And hopefully that tech preview, as they've said, will come this year. They didn't sound convinced by that, but hopefully towards the end of the year, maybe this will be the big thing that goes onto the tech preview channel. The new inventory that they showed off earlier this year also is a candidate for being shown and talked about. They have been working on this again. It's been in monthly reports. Will we see it kind of in game? Maybe. It seemed quite early on, but it's a possible thing that they might show us. There's also been speculation in the community that underground facilities might be seeing some work, and maybe the distribution centers will see some updates, maybe some below the ground level floors to these things. I don't know. They perform so badly, but it would be interesting to see underground facilities and distribution centers seeing some stuff, because it's almost like they just forgot they're in the game and they just said, they're there, but we're going to ignore them. I would like to see some of the underground stuff. Some of the concept art that they first showed for these was pretty cool, and so it would be fun to see some expansion of those locations. CIG's approach over 2025 has really been to add locations with different gameplay. So will we see some early work on what they plan for 2026? Obviously, we've had, like we said, the Hathor location, the ASD stuff, the worm labs, and the actual location with the worm spawning. Will they show us their plans for the next year? Potentially not, because they now also are wanting to kind of surprise us and keep the story-based stuff under wraps until the last minute. So maybe that isn't stuff that we'll see. I don't think we're going to see anything about dynamic server meshing. The massive Benoit SEL that came out last week has covered all of that stuff, and it kind of just sounds as though the dynamic meshing is in the early stages, so I don't think there'll be anything to show. Same really for Vulkan. That's obviously been in the tech preview. There isn't really much for CIG to update us on. Could we see something on official VR support? Really pushing the boat out here. We know that CIG are working on VR. Are they going to want it to release with Squadron 42? Well, who knows? That's very hopeful from me, but you never know. There are loads of potential things that CIG could talk about. What do you think we'll see? Am I missing something obvious? Again, let me know down in the comments.